My name is Meredith Cole, and at 33 years old I was still trying to figure out if my mother loved me or just loved what I could do for her. I stood in the kitchen of the house I grew up in, the morning of my sister's engagement brunch, holding a stack of printed place cards I'd spent 3 hours designing the night before. My mother swept past me with a tray of pastries and said, "Meredith, put those down and fix the coffee. You know your father can't function without his coffee." I fixed the coffee. Visual: kitchen counter, coffee maker dripping, place cards stacked beside a bowl of fruit. That was the arrangement. I made things work. I smoothed things over. I made sure the coffee was right, and the place cards were beautiful, and the seating chart accounted for Aunt Carol's gluten allergy, and Uncle James's feud with Cousin Bethany, and the fact that my sister, Hannah, would refuse to sit anywhere that wasn't front and center. And nobody ever asked me where I wanted to sit. Visual: dining room table, white linen, silverware set for 20. At 12, I calculated my parents' quarterly tax payments because my father's accountant had retired and they couldn't be bothered to find a new one. I sat at the kitchen table for 3 hours with a calculator and a stack of receipts, cross-referencing deductions, and when I handed my mother the final number, she said, "Good girl," and patted my head like I was a Labrador who'd retrieved a stick. At 19, my mother told me to take out an extra student loan so she could use the surplus to cover Hannah's sorority dues. She said it was temporary. She said I understood how important this was for Hannah's social standing. "Howie," she said, "you're so sensible, Meredith. Hannah needs a little help, that's all." The loan sat in my name for 11 years. I paid it off myself, working night shifts at a pediatric clinic while I finished my nursing degree. My mother never mentioned it again. Hannah never knew. Visual: hospital hallway, fluorescent lights, a woman in scrubs checking a chart about you. 11 years. That number kept coming back. 11 years I'd been the one who managed the family accounts, coordinated the holidays, made the reservations, remembered the birthdays, picked up the prescriptions, called the insurance company, fixed the internet, drove my father to his appointments, and handled every single thing my parents and my sister couldn't be bothered to handle themselves. 11 years of showing up. Ow! And not once had anyone asked me what I actually wanted for my own life. Not once had anyone thanked me without tacking on another request at the end. Oh, not once had my mother said, "Meredith, I see you. Instead of Meredith, can you just..." The brunch was for Hannah's engagement to a man named Spencer Ellison, whose family owned a regional chain of luxury car dealerships. My mother had been planning this day for 6 months. She'd hired a private caterer, rented a tent, ordered flowers from a shop in the next county because the local florist wasn't good enough. She'd sent out invitations on cream-colored cardstock with gold foil lettering. She'd spent $12,000 on a party for a couple that wasn't even getting married until next spring. And she'd asked me to handle the logistical spreadsheet for the guest list, the seating arrangements, the catering timeline, the parking coordination, and the music playlist. For free. Because I understood how to keep things running. "You just have a gift for this," my mother had said when she handed me the spreadsheet. "You always know exactly how to make things work." Visual: laptop open to a spreadsheet, rows and columns, highlighted cells. I sat in my childhood bedroom that morning, staring at the place cards I'd made, and I thought about the document I'd found in my father's study 6 weeks earlier. A document I'd stumbled onto while I was looking for an old insurance policy he'd asked me to locate. A document that nobody in my family had ever mentioned to me, because they didn't think they had to. It was a trust document, 23 pages long, filed with a law firm in the city. My grandparents had established it when I was born. They'd put $170,000 into it, with instructions that it was to be released to me on my 35th birthday. Except in the original document, buried on page 14, there was a clause. A clause that said if my parents established a separate educational or professional advancement fund for any of my siblings before my 35th birthday, that siblings' fund had to be equal to my trust balance within 5 years of the date of the trust's establishment. And if they did not meet that requirement, the trust would become accessible to me on my 30th birthday instead. Visual. Legal document on a desk. A highlighted paragraph. A red pen circling a date. My grandparents had been lawyers. They drafted it that way deliberately, years before I was old enough to understand what a trust even was. And my parents had never mentioned it to me because they never saw page 14. They'd skimmed the first few pages, seen the money, and decided they'd deal with it later. Except later came and went, and Hannah had gotten a $30,000 educational fund when she went to college. 30,000, not 170. And the clause had triggered. On my 30th birthday, the trust became accessible to me. I could have claimed it then, but I didn't know about it. Nobody told me. Nobody told me. The document sat in my father's filing cabinet for 3 years while I kept making coffee and organizing brunches and paying for things I shouldn't have been paying for. Visual. Filing cabinet drawer. Manila folders. A document pulled halfway out. I didn't mention it to them when I found it. I didn't say a word. I took photographs of every page with my phone and put the document back in the drawer exactly where I'd found it, and I spent the next 6 weeks thinking about what it meant. Because it wasn't just about the money. It was about the fact that they'd never told me. It was about the fact that I'd been paying for Hannah's sorority dues out of loans in my own name, while $170,000 sat in a trust that I could have accessed 3 years ago. I'd been making coffee. I'd been fixing the internet. I'd been driving my father to appointments. And I'd been doing it all while my inheritance was sitting there completely ignored. Family comes before everything, my mother said at the brunch, raising a glass of champagne to toast her daughter's engagement. That's what matters most. Family. Visual, brunch table, champagne flutes, sunlight through a tent, laughter. She said it to the Ellison family. No, you're dandy in the card. As you call a bit too. She said it to Spencer's mother, Carol, who sat at the head of the table with her pearls and her practiced smile. She said it to Spencer's father, who was a quiet man in an expensive suit, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Family, my mother repeated, is everything. My sister Hannah smiled. And she was gorgeous, always had been. Golden hair, perfect skin, a laugh that made people want to be near her. She was the kind of person who'd never had to clean a bathroom, or fold a fitted sheet, or learn how to do taxes. She'd just shown up and been loved. I sat at the table with the place cards I'd made, and I thought about the inheritance. Spencer's mother leaned over to me halfway through the meal and said, "Meredith, your mother tells me you work as a nurse. That must be so fulfilling." I run the patient scheduling and records department at a pediatric clinic, I said. I've been there for 6 years. Oh, Carol said. So you handle the paperwork? I didn't correct her. I smiled and said yes, I handle the paperwork. And then I sat there and watched my mother steer the conversation back to Hannah and Spencer and the details of the engagement party and the beautiful life they were going to have together. Visual. A woman's hands resting on a tablecloth. Nails plain. No rings. Later that afternoon, after the last guests had left, and I'd already spent an hour packing up leftover food and stacking chairs, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. She was still glowing from the success of the brunch. She squeezed my arm and said, "Meredith, you really are a lifesaver. I don't know how I'd manage without you." She said it like a compliment. No, she said it like she meant it. No, wait. You always understand what needs to be done, she added. That's what makes you so special. 4 words. The phrase she'd been using my whole life. You always understand. As if understanding meant I agreed. As if understanding meant I didn't see the difference between the way they treated me and the way they treated Hannah. As if understanding meant I didn't have feelings about any of it. I've already started planning the wedding shower, she said, pulling out her phone. I was thinking we could hold it at the country club. Hannah's future mother-in-law is a member. It would be so nice to... Mom, I said, I found the trust. She didn't react for a moment. Her face stayed exactly the same. Then she put her phone down on the counter, very slowly, and said, "What trust?" "The one Grandma and Grandpa set up for me when I was born. The one with $170,000 in it. The one I was supposed to get on my 35th birthday, or on my 30th if you set up a fund for Hannah that wasn't equal to it." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. Her voice was flat. Her hand was resting on the counter, and I could see her fingers pressing into the marble. "There was a clause," I said. "Page 14. Oh. If you established an educational fund for Hannah before I turned 35, you had to match my trust balance within 5 years, or else the trust became accessible to me on my 30th birthday. You gave Hannah $30,000, Mom. You didn't match 170. It was accessible to me 3 years ago. I could have claimed it. But you never told me. Visual. Marble countertop, a phone beside a stack of dirty napkins. Her fingers stopped pressing. She straightened up. Your grandparents were always so dramatic with their legal documents. You know that was never meant to be taken literally. It was just a formality. They didn't actually mean. They meant exactly what they wrote, I said. They were lawyers, Mom. They wrote very precise documents, and I've already filed the paperwork to claim it. She stared at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. I could see her processing, calculating, trying to figure out how to spin this back to something that worked in her favor. "Meredith," she said, very carefully, "that money was supposed to be for the family. Your grandparents would have wanted it to benefit all of us. You can't just take it for yourself. That's not how family works." She said it again. That's not how family works. I had heard that phrase from her 6 times in my adult life. 6 times when she'd asked me to cover a bill or a loan or a cost that should never have been mine to carry. 6 times when I'd done something she wanted, and then she'd told me I was being selfish for wanting to be treated fairly in return. You always understand, she used to say. And then I'd fold. But I wasn't folding anymore. I'm claiming the trust, I said. And I'm also going to be stepping back from the family finances. She blinked. What does that mean? It means I'm not managing the accounts anymore. I'm not paying the property tax out of my own account and letting you pay me back 4 months later. I'm not covering the internet bill because you forgot. I'm not coordinating the holidays or making the reservations or handling the guest lists. I'm done, Mom. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You can't just do this. Hannah's wedding is coming up. We need you to help with the arrangements. You need me to be an unpaid event planner, I said, and I'm not doing it anymore. It's not about being unpaid, she said, her voice rising. It's about being part of this family. You're Hannah's sister. You have responsibilities. My father came into the kitchen then. Oh, he'd been out on the patio saying goodbye to the Ellisons. He looked at my mother's face and then at mine, and something in his expression shifted. He knew something was wrong. What's going on? He asked. Meredith is threatening to abandon the family, my mother said. She found the trust from her grandparents and she's claiming it. And now she's saying she won't help with Hannah's wedding. I watched my father's face. He didn't look surprised. You knew about the clause, I said. You knew I could have accessed it 3 years ago. He didn't answer. He just looked at the floor. We were going to tell you eventually, my mother said quickly. We just didn't think it mattered. You never seemed to need the money. You were always so good at managing things on your own. I thought about the night shifts I'd worked, the student loans I'd paid off, the savings account I'd built with my own wages. Slowly, because I'd never expected any help. I thought about the trips I'd skipped, and the vacations I'd never taken, and the apartment I'd rented in the cheaper part of town because I couldn't afford anything better. You always understand, my mother said. 4 times now. First in the kitchen that morning, then at the brunch, then just now in the kitchen, and now again. 4 times, I said. You've said that to me 4 times today alone. You always understand. As if understanding something means I'm supposed to accept it. As if I'm not allowed to be angry or hurt or disappointed. Because I always understand. My mother's face was red. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. It's exactly what you meant. And I've been hearing it my whole life. You always understand. You're so sensible, Meredith. You're so good at managing things, Meredith. I don't know how we'd manage without you, Meredith. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened the screenshots I'd taken of the trust document. I placed the phone on the counter in front of them. Visual. Phone screen on a marble counter. Legal text highlighted. That's the clause, I said. Page 14. I don't expect either of you to understand it fully, because you've never read it. But it's there. I've already spoken to the law firm. The trust is mine. My mother's mouth opened again, but I kept going. The internet bill has been paid out of my account for the last 4 years. That stops today. The property tax on the lake house, which I've been covering while you paid me back in installments 3 months behind schedule, stops today. I've already taken my name off the joint account we opened when I was 19. You'll need to set up new billing for all of that. And then, say, you can't just, my mother started. I can, I said, and I already have. She stood in the middle of the kitchen with her hands shaking. Ow! My father sat down at the table without a word. The house was quiet, and the last of the brunch guests had gone. The tent was still up in the backyard, and I could see the chairs I'd stacked through the window, waiting for the rental company to pick them up in the morning. I thought about the trust. $170,000. It wouldn't make me rich, but it would make me free. It would cover the down payment on a small house in a neighborhood where I wanted to live. It would let me start a savings account for the things I actually wanted, not the things my mother needed me to cover. I thought about the 11 years I'd spent being useful. My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text from my sister. What did you do to Mom? I didn't answer. The next morning I woke up in my own apartment, in my own bed, and I made coffee the way I liked it. Dark. Din. Extra. 1 sugar. I sat at my kitchen table and checked my phone. 47 messages. My mother. Oh. My father. Hannah. A few from extended family members who'd heard some version of events. I didn't open any of them. Visual. Kitchen table, coffee mug, phone face down. A week passed. Then, 2. I went to work. I'm a patient scheduling department. I talked to doctors and nurses and parents who were worried about their kids, and I did my job well, because I'd always been good at managing things. But I stopped managing things for my family. Hannah called me 3 times. I let them all go to voicemail. The 4th time, she left a message. Meredith, I don't know what happened between you and Mom, but you can't just disappear. I need you to help me with the wedding shower invitations. Please, you always handle the invitation. I listened to her voice on the recording, and I thought about how she'd never actually said she needed me. She'd always said she needed what I could do. I didn't call her back. My mother sent an email, then another, then a 3rd. Nail. The first one was angry. How dare you do this to your family? I raised you better than this. The second one was cold. I didn't need you. Your father and I have decided to review the trust documents ourselves. We believe there may have been an error in your interpretation. The third one was different. It was quieter. It said, Meredith, I don't understand why you're doing this. You always understood us. You always understood why we made the choices we made. I read that email 3 times. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and watched the morning light move across the floor. And then I wrote back. I understand now. 3 words. 3 words that meant something different than they'd ever meant before. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I just let the message sit there, in her inbox, and I didn't write anything else. 6 weeks later, I bought a house. A small one. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny backyard with a single tree, and some grass that needed mowing. It was on the edge of the city, in a neighborhood where people kept their porches clean and waved to each other from across the street. Visual, small house, porch, a tree in the yard. I moved my things. I hung my own curtains. I painted the kitchen walls the color I'd always wanted, even though my mother used to say that shade was too bold for a living room. I bought a dining table with my own money, a solid oak thing with a single scratch on one leg that the seller said came from a moving truck. I didn't invite anyone to see it. I just lived in it. My father called me on a Tuesday evening. I answered because I'd been standing in my new kitchen, looking out the window at the tree, and something in me just wanted to hear his voice. He sounded tired. Meredith, I'm sorry. I waited. I should have told you, he said, about the trust. I should have told you when it changed. I didn't know how to explain it to your mother. She was so focused on Hannah's wedding, she thought it would upset things. It would have upset things, I said. It would have changed everything. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You deserve to be angry. I know that. I don't want you to disappear forever. You're still my daughter. I leaned against the counter and looked at the scratch on the dining table leg. Dad, I said, I'm not disappearing. I'm just not being useful anymore. He didn't have an answer for that. Hannah's wedding happened without me. I didn't attend. I heard from a cousin that my mother spent the entire day asking where I was and telling the Ellisons that I was sick. She told them I'd come down with something and couldn't make it. The cousin who told me this looked embarrassed. It was weird, she said. Your mom kept saying it. Every time someone asked about you, she'd say Meredith's sick, and then she'd change the subject. I sat in my new house that afternoon and I didn't feel anything about it. Not sadness, not anger, just a kind of heavy stillness, like the air before a storm that decides not to break. My phone sat on the counter all day, silent. Nobody called me. Nobody texted me. Nobody asked me to fix anything or manage anything or handle anything. I made dinner. I ate it alone at my oak table. I went to bed early. And the next morning, I woke up and my phone was still silent. Visual, a phone on a counter, no notifications, morning light. 3 months after I bought the house, my mother showed up at my door. I wasn't surprised. I'd known she'd eventually come. She'd never been able to let the last word sit. She stood on my porch in her white pants and her pearl earrings, looking out of place against the peeling paint on the railing. Meredith? She said. Mom, Ma. He hesitated. She looked past me at the house, at the curtains I'd hung myself, at the small vase of flowers I'd put on the dining table. This is a nice little place, she said. Thank you. She stood there for a moment. I didn't move to let her in. I've been thinking, she said, about what you said at the brunch, about always understanding. I waited. Maybe I took that for granted, she said. Maybe I didn't realize how much you were doing. She was trying. She was really trying. I could see it in the way her fingers tightened around her purse strap, the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I'm not going to apologize for how I raised you, she said. I did the best I could, but I see what you're saying. That you felt invisible. That we made you feel like you were just there to help. She'd never said anything like that before. Not once in 33 years. I could see it was costing her something to say it now. "I'm not coming back," I said. "Not to the way things were." "I know," she said. "I know that. I wanted you to know that I heard you. That's all." She left after that. She got back into her car and drove away, and I watched her go from my front porch. She didn't ask me to come back. She didn't ask me to manage anything. She just left. I stood on my porch for a long time after she was gone. Hannah sent me a letter a few weeks later, handwritten on thick paper with her name embossed at the top. Visual envelope on a kitchen counter, handwritten address. It said, "Meredith, I know you don't want to talk to me right now, but I wanted to tell you that I always knew you were the one who made things work. I just didn't think about it. I didn't think about you at all, honestly. I was too busy being me, and I'm sorry for that. I'm not going to ask you to fix anything. I just wanted you to know." I read it twice. Then I put it in the drawer with the rest of the mail I'd been meaning to sort through. I didn't write back, but I kept the letter. The trust settled in my account on a Thursday morning. $170,000, minus the legal fees I'd paid to have the firm review the documents. I stared at the number on my banking app for a long time. I thought about all the things I could do with it. The vacations, the renovations, the savings account that would let me retire early. And then I closed the app and put my phone down and went to work. Because that's what I did. I went to work. I did my job. I came home. I ate dinner. I slept. I woke up. I did it all over again. But I wasn't doing it for them anymore. I was doing it for myself. My name is Meredith Cole. I'm 33 years old. And I finally stopped understanding. Now,